Today's webinar, we're looking at the chart of accounts in Sage 50 Accounts this afternoon. We'll spend probably around about half an hour looking at the software, and we'll be picking up questions along the way as well. And I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping just before we do get started though. So if you have attended a webinar before, you'll be fully aware of this. Just getting tongue-tied this afternoon. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you've enabled it, then you'll find you're just automatically muted. You can't unmute yourself during this session. There is a copy of today's slides available for you if you do want to download them. We're not using many slides for today. All of the information that you need, it will be available from within the Help Center. And we're going to primarily concentrate on a live demonstration in today's session as well. Now, because if you've got a microphone and it's muted, obviously you can't verbally ask any questions, but that doesn't mean you can't ask us questions. If you've got anything for us, if you're not sure about something, you want to ask a question, or you have a comment on something we cover, pop it into the questions panel. You should see that in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you can't currently see that, you just need to click that little icon on your toolbar, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark, and you should then see that and be able to start typing. So I'm joined today by Jackie, James and Tina. They'll all be on hand to assist with any questions that you might have. So anything and everything, pop them into the questions panel. I'm sure you'll keep them busy. And we'll either provide an answer or maybe send you a link to the relevant Help Center article that would answer your query, or maybe just point you in the right direction. So anything, everything, pop it in there. As I say, we'll try our best to pick that up. If you don't get a chance to answer your question, then please get in touch with our support team at some point, or sorry, excuse me, or get in touch. Right, anyway, we'll get started. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. So a little bit of background as to what the chart of accounts actually is. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to concentrate on live demonstrations today. So I'll be sharing my screen. We'll run through a number of demonstrations covering what you need to know about the chart of accounts. So how you go about adding a chart of accounts layout, how you go about editing one, deleting one, if you need to get rid of any. We'll be looking at the categories and the nominal ranges. And possibly the most difficult part, if anything, relating to the chart of accounts is the floating categories. If you can understand that bit, then the rest of it is really straightforward. We're also going to look at something that's really essential that you do run, is checking for errors. Loads of information about in our Help Center as well. If you do check for your chart of accounts for errors and you find anything, there'll be information in the Help Center as to how you go about correcting that. Also, just towards the end, I'll explain more about some of the upcoming webinars, just to give you an idea of the topics. And then we'll hang around for any questions that you might have as well. Okay, so we'll get started. Right, so I've got a slide first of all that I'm going to use just to give a little bit of an explanation as to what the chart of accounts is, and then I'm just going to switch straight across to my sharing my desktop. You see me working in the software, and we'll run through the various demonstrations. So the chart of accounts basically provides the structure for a number of your management reports. It's used in a few other areas as well, but basically the main area where you are going to see it is when you go to either run the profit and loss report or the balance sheet report. It's not used by the trial balance. Trial balance is just a list of nominal codes. There's no real structure to that one. But you'll see it when, as I say, when you'll be offered that option as part of running a profit and loss and a balance sheet. And it basically helps the software to determine where a nominal code sits. So is it classed as a profit and loss or balance sheet? And within the likes of the profit and loss, is it classed as a sales nominal, a purchase nominal, a direct expense, or an overhead, or even a taxation nominal code? And similar if it's classed as a balance sheet nominal code. Now, you can have multiple charts of accounts, and there could be a number of reasons why you might have multiple charts of accounts as well. Our Help Center, or so I should say the Help files, many years ago, used to say that you could have up to 64,000 different layouts. So it's as good as unlimited. I think the most I've come across is probably in the region of about maybe 20, and that's going way, way back, where people would use different charts of accounts to maybe only pull through certain nominal codes because maybe you didn't have at the time, you wouldn't have maybe had the flexibility that the departments option now offers you within the software. So you might have different layouts just because you only wanted to show a certain level of information. And hopefully that's what you're going to understand more about in today's session. So you've got to have a minimum of one, but it's basically unlimited. Now, where you'll find that is within the nominal codes window, and you've got the chart of accounts icon at the top on your toolbar. So I'm going to switch to my screen at that point, and we'll start running through a bit of a demonstration with you all. So we're going to go into nominal codes, and you've got your chart of accounts option here. So what I mentioned earlier was you're probably more likely to be aware of the chart of accounts from when you're running a profit and loss. So when you click the profit and loss icon or the balance sheet, a number of other options as well, but generally the profit and loss of the balance sheet. When you run that report, as part of the criteria, as well as the period that you want to run that for, you'll be offered, right, which chart of accounts layout do you want to use for this report, or which structure do you want to use in the background. And if you've got more than one set up, obviously you'll be able to choose. But the chart of accounts option, you'll find it up on the toolbar at the top. So if we just give that a click, so it brings up this window. Now, as I say, by default, you will have one. Some of you may have already experimented with chart of accounts in the past, so you may have others on there as well, but everyone will have a minimum of one. Now, I'll just quickly run through these options along the top just to get that out of the way. So obviously add, ask you for a name, just put my name in today. I'll click add, and it then presents me with a blank chart of accounts window. We'll come back to editing your chart of accounts and the structure, etc., a little bit later on. Just save it. Do get a warning. We're going to come back to that as well, but it now puts the additional option on there, the Michael chart of accounts. Mentions partial. I'll explain about that later on as well. It just means there are errors, but we'll come on to errors a little bit later on. So that's the add option. Again, just about add as many different layouts as you want, but it does create a blank one. You've got the edit option. Now, if you highlight a chart of accounts, whichever one you want to look at, click edit, it will take you into the chart of accounts and you can start amending it at that point. Just close out of that. You've got the copy option. Copy isn't available if you're on the essentials level of the software. So by default, on essentials, if you wanted to create another chart of accounts, you do have to start from scratch. But on the higher levels, so standard and professional, if you rather than create a chart of accounts from scratch, or maybe you want to play around with it a little bit, then what you can do is highlight a chart of accounts that you want to base your trial one on, as I suppose, is you then click copy, and it would copy that chart of accounts. It means that you can experiment with that one rather than amending the standard one that you've got already set up. So a lot easier to, a bit like if you were designing an invoice layout, a lot easier to find a one that's close to what you want and then make the amends than it is to set one up from scratch. But some of you probably will set one up from scratch. It just takes a little bit longer. Now the make default option, basically you have to have one chart of accounts. And if you've only got the one, it will be flagged as being the current one at the bottom here. So if I highlight this one as an example and click make default, it will change the description. So in the background, this one is now the default. And that has two purposes, having a chart of accounts set as the default. The first one, and this is a good little tip, this one, if you're ever going into generate your management reports and you think, right, well, I always choose a different chart of accounts. So you're always accessing this drop down and choosing one of the other ones. If you set your other one as the default, so make current, So using that option within the chart of accounts window, it means it'll automatically be selected when you go to run the report. So again, just saves you a couple of clicks, drop down, and then choosing your chart of accounts. The other option or the other benefit of flagging one of your chart of accounts as the default is that when I go to delete it, it'll ask me, are you sure you want to do this? If I click yes, it'll say you cannot delete this specific chart of accounts because it's the default. So whichever one I've got named in the bottom here, that's flagged as the default, and I cannot delete that one. So you always have to have one flagged as the default. And because you can't delete the default, it means you're always going to have one chart of accounts listed. So I'm just going to set mine back to the first one on my list. So we'll make default. And what it now means is if I highlight a specific chart of accounts and click delete, it'll just ask, are you sure? So click yes, do that one again. Are you sure? Yes, and it'll get rid of it for you. Now your chart of accounts would be included in your backup. So if you have deleted a chart of accounts in error, you could potentially restore, but bear in mind, you can't just restore a chart of accounts layout. It will restore your other data at the same time. Right, final two options I want to quickly mention. I don't think I've ever seen these used within this area of the software, is print list. Obviously, just going to send this list of descriptions across to your printer. And the other one is sent to Excel. I think for consistency, that's there as well. And if you click that, where's my Excel gone? It just basically, again, transfers the descriptions across to your desktop version of Excel if you've got that installed. I think maybe you only ever use that if you were trying to find out, right, maybe you're sending out an email and saying, right, who uses which chart of accounts? Which ones can I get rid of? You're probably never going to use it otherwise. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on the main part of the demo today, which is editing your chart of accounts. So we're going to concentrate on this first one. We'll click edit. And when we go into edit the chart of accounts, you've got the two tabs. You've got your profit and loss tab and you've got your balance sheet tab. We'll go through each of them in just a moment. Now you've also got your title. So if you want to change the name of your chart of accounts, you can do that at the top. But coming back to the tabs, so let's start with the profit and loss. So your chart of accounts on the profit and loss tab, you've got 5 sections: sales, purchases, direct expenses, overheads, and taxation. You can change the names of those. Now there is a 6th line there. You can't actually do anything with that 6th line. So we always get asked about that one. Can I add another section on? You can't. You're restricted to the 5 sections, but you can change the name of it. So rather than sales, if you wanted to call it income, for instance. So I just press the tab key, you'll see on the right, if I was to produce a profit and loss report, it's going to use that text that I've just entered there as the title for that first section. We'll just set that back to sales, so we've got the default. So you can rename them if required. Now, when you click into a section, what you've got is you've got this, what you term these categories, these nominal ranges. So a nominal range is made up of a bit of text, so a title, and then you've got a low and a high value. So these are based on your nominal ranges. Now it is based on a low and a high value. You cannot just say, I want to include this nominal code, this one, and this one. If you've got any in between, let's say in between that range, then it would include that as well. So that's something to bear in mind if you are setting up new nominal codes. So think about how you want to report on that, how you want to show it on your management reports. Now you can have up to 80 ranges within this section. So 80 titles, 80 ranges. 80 is the maximum within any section. So you've got 80 within your sales, 80 within your purchases, 80 within your direct expenses, overheads, and taxation is the same. Now, when it comes to amending your ranges, so in this instance, we've got product sales 4,000 to 4,099. Now, what that would mean is when I go to run a profit and loss report, it's going to look at this section and it's going to say, right, for product sales, we want to add up all the values that exist within this nominal range, so 4,000 to 4,099. So that might be okay for some purposes. So if you have to see the bank manager, for instance, but internally, you might want a greater level of detail. So you might even want to get down to individual nominal code level on the likes of your profit and loss report. So you can amend the ranges if required, even just so it picks up a single nominal code. So for instance, you could have 4,000 to 4,000. And what that would mean is when you generate a profit loss, it's going to say whatever your title is. So in my case, product sales. And if I was to change that one to 4,000 as an example, it would mean it's then only picking up that one nominal code. So I'm going to get a much more detailed profit and loss report. Whereas if I was to use the standard, where we've got quite big ranges, you're going to get much more of a summary where figures are merged together. Now, if you do want to amend your ranges, two useful function keys. So the first one is F7. F7 will insert a line. Now, I could just add additional ranges on the blank lines here. That's fine. But if I want to keep them in numerical order, and it's much easier to deal with your chart of accounts if you're looking for errors, etc., if you do have them in numerical order. But that's entirely up to you. It's not a necessity. So if I click onto export sales as an example, and I press F7, I'm going to get a message pop up. So it asks me to confirm. And the message says, inserting a line will move all categories down by one. You will lose any information on the last line of this section where you're sure you want to continue. Now, I just click yes to that. But what does that message mean? So you can see I've got that blank line there. Now, what the message is basically saying is, if right at the bottom of this list, I had a range on that 80th line, by inserting a line, bearing in mind the maximum is 80 ranges, it means that it's going to push that the name and the nominal range, it's going to push it off the end of that section. And therefore, it would then not be picked up if I was to run a profit and loss or a balance sheet, because it's not including that. So that's all it's saying. It doesn't mean I lose this line. It means anything on the last line of the section, so the 80th line, would be pushed off the end, so you would lose that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press F7 a few times. I'll get that message each and every time. So we'll just do insert some blanks. Right. So what I can now do is, rather than have 4,000 to 4,099, I can start breaking that down. I'll put another name in there. So we'll do sales. I think I've got that. I think it's sales south. I've got it set up as. And then I'll put my nominal range in. I can type in the nominal range, or I can start selecting it. So if we just go to the 4,000 range, so we'll say sales south, select that one, and we'll do 4001. So I'll change the description of that one as well. We'll do sales north. So we now got sales north, 4,000 to 4,000. So it's picking up a single nominal code. Sales south, 4001 to 4001. We'll do sales Scotland. I think I've got mine set up as next. And we'll pop a few additional ranges in. Now, for what was left of the range, so bearing in mind the original range was picking up 4,000 to 4,099. Maybe I don't want to split the rest of that. I'm just quite happy to have it grouped. So we'll pop in a description, whatever you want that to be, and I'll do 4,004 to 4,099. So I've still got the same nominal codes being picked up by this chart of accounts. So when I run that profit and loss report, it's still going to essentially pick up 4,000 to 4,099, but it's now going to show that as, or certain lines as individual values. Now we've got a blank line then. Again, it's not imperative that you get rid of that blank line. You may find it looks a bit more organized if you've got blanks in here and there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of it. And this is where your other function key comes in handy, F8. So you might be familiar with F7 and F8 from when you've been working, entering batches of transactions, for instance. So you're partway through a batch, you think, oh, I've missed a line. I want it to be right in the middle of what I've entered. So you highlight the line, F7, moves everything down by one, and inserts that blank line so you can start entering your details. But F8 would discard a line. So if I do have a blank or I want to get rid of a line from this, I can just click on the line, F8, it'll delete that line and move everything up. Now, anything that was pushed off the end previously by the previous message, it doesn't bring that back on, it just loses that information. So if you did want to bring something back on, if you were using all 80 lines, you would need to re-enter that. Now, what that will mean, if I just quickly save that, and I go on to my profit and loss reports, and I'll just preview it. And I've got last year's data still on this set of data, so I'm looking at 2021. And I run that report using that chart of accounts. And what we can see now is I've got a value for sales North, sales South, sales Scotland. I mustn't have anything against Wales, so it's not picked up, and some other balances as well, rather than it just grouping those values together. So that's where your chart of accounts and how it provides the structure for your management reports. Right, let's go back into the chart of accounts and we'll edit it again. So remember, you've got 80 nominal ranges that you can specify, and that's for each section. The only time I think I've ever seen it, maybe someone fill a section, is in the overhead section, but it is 80 ranges. So it used to be quite a common question. How can I add more? You can add additional nominal codes, but you can only have a maximum of 80 ranges in that section. Right, now sales, purchases, direct expenses, as I click through them, you'll see the ranges are changing here, but essentially the layout is exactly the same. So it works in exactly the same way. When you run a report, you're using this chart of accounts, it will go through the various sections, look at the ranges, and obviously if there is a balance for the nominal range specified for the relevant date range, it will include it on the relevant report. Now there is a difference, and that difference is on the balance sheet. Now, again, you can still change the descriptions. So for the balance sheet, you've got fixed assets, current liabilities, long-term liabilities, and also a capital and reserve section. So if I click through the various sections, you'll see fixed assets, it looks the same. You've got your descriptions, you've got your low and your high value. So again, the nominal ranges work in exactly the same way. I'm going to come back to current assets and current liabilities in a moment because that's where the difference lies. Long-term liabilities, capital and reserves, again, they look identical layout-wise. Now, the difference is with the current assets and the current liabilities. And when I click into these, you'll see that rather than just one big box, you've got two boxes. Now, the middle section, this one here, it works in exactly the same way as what we've just been looking at. And that goes for the same for current liabilities as well. It's split into two. So middle section, again, you can have up to 80 lines, works in exactly the same way. The difference is this section here at the bottom. So it's the same for both areas. Now you can have up to 10 ranges in this section, the floating nominal account section. Now, I describe this as being probably the most difficult thing to get your head around as far as the chart of accounts is concerned. Mentioned that one a little bit earlier. So if you can understand this section, then hopefully you're onto a winner. Now, floating categories, or floating nominal accounts, as it's termed there, what it will do is when you run a report and you use a specific chart of accounts, so let's say you're running a balance sheet, you want to generate for a particular period, what it's going to do is it's going to look within the current assets. Obviously, it'll generate the standard balances as normal. But the floating categories, what it will do, it will calculate the balance for whatever period or whatever nominal range you've got specified. And it will calculate a balance. So if it's a debit balance or a positive balance as far as a current asset is concerned, then it will show that balance in that section. If it calculates a negative, it won't. So the likes of your bank account by default, you may find some months you've got a positive balance, some months you're overdrawn. So what that enables it to do is, depending on the balance that's calculated, it enables the balance to float between the two. So it's not going to show as a negative as such. What it would do is, if it's a positive balance, that bank account for the range 1200 to 1209, if it's a positive balance, it would show that as a current assets. If it's a negative balance, it's going to show it as a positive value, but it would appear in the current liabilities section on that report. So that's where it comes from. It floats between the two, depending on the balance. Now, if you do not want it to float between the two, what you do is you remove it from the section, the floating section. You would need to remove it from both sections. And you would just add it either into the current assets, into the standard section, or you would put it into the current liabilities in the standard section, but not both. The only time you would have it in both is when you set it up as a floating. Now, if you add anything into the floating categories, so if I just click onto that top line and I'll put my initials in just as an example. If I press the tab key, it'll prompt me, do you wish to copy this range to the current liabilities? I personally think it should just do this automatically, because you should always click yes to this prompt. And then we can put a range in. So let's just pop a random range in for the time being. Now, if I click into current liabilities, you'll see it's added it in there as well. So it's automatically made both of the floating nominal account ranges, it's made them the same. Similarly, if I go in and I remove that line and then press the tab key, basically it's saying, do you want to copy it, but it's basically essentially saying, do you want to make the same changes? And you just click yes to that. So both should be identical. So if you can't get your head around that bit as to why you might have a balance that floats between the two, so bank accounts are obvious ones, VAT liability is a common one as well. So we put the VAT liability in there by default, so it picks up your sales tax, your purchase tax, and your VAT liability accounts by default, because obviously it means that it caters for all businesses then. So for some businesses, you're probably always in a position where you'll have a liability. Other businesses, you might find you're always in a position where you can recover VAT, and some you might float between the two. And again, that's why the VAT liability is there. But again, if you always want it to appear in a fixed position, so you need to remove the range and pop it into the relevant sort of fixed section, as it were, either just in current assets or just in current liabilities. Now I'll just save the changes there. So as I mentioned, that's probably the most difficult part of the chart of accounts. Final thing I want to mention in relation to the chart of accounts is in relation to checking for errors, and it takes me on nicely to another query as well. And one of the most common queries, if I just, what I'll do is I'll quickly copy this chart of accounts. I'll go into this chart of accounts, I'll edit it. And what I'll do is I'm just going to knock out this range, so the one that says sales north 4,000 to 4,000. So to do that, remember F8. So it removes that line and moves everything up. I'm just going to save the changes and I get a warning. Now, if you're saving your chart of accounts and you get this warning saying incomplete chart of accounts, it means you've got some errors in there. I'll come back to it in a moment. Now, any chart of accounts that has errors in it, so things like missing nominal codes, maybe nominal codes included in more than one range, ranges that overlap each other, or ranges within a range, or maybe the floating areas, the floating nominal ranges, maybe where they aren't the same in both sections. So all of that, those situations will generate an error. And if you've got errors, it will pop the word partial on the end of your chart of accounts description. Now, it's quite a common one. How can I get rid of the word partial off the end of my description? I've seen it in the past. People will go into edit. You'll see the description at the top. They'll click in, get rid of the word partial, save the changes. But because you've got errors, it says incomplete chart of accounts. You click OK and it puts the word partial back on. So if you're looking at your chart of accounts, it's a good indicator. Now, to just find out what the errors are, all you need to do is edit your chart of accounts, and you've got a check option in the top corner here. So I'll click on that chart of accounts errors option. I'll just preview it so you can see what that looks like. It generates a report for you. And in this case, if I just zoom in so you can see that, hopefully you can see that nice and clearly. It's telling me that nominal code, in this case, nominal code 4000, is not represented in the chart, so it's not included. That is by far the most common type of error to have, where you've maybe created a nominal code and it's just not included in any of the ranges. Now, to resolve that type of error, we've got a couple of options. If it was a nominal code that I didn't use at all, and I've got no intention of using, then potentially I could delete that nominal code. It's one way of resolving it. The other is to obviously add a range in. So I could come down to a blank line and pop in a range maybe for that one nominal code. It's then going to be picked up. The other option would be for me to extend a range. So if I went into just do 4000 to 4001 as an example, go back to check, save the changes. And when you check your chart of accounts, hopefully that's what you're going to get. No errors found in this chart. So I just OK that. And I've now no longer got errors in my chart of accounts. Now, I set it back to, let's say, product sales, which I think is where I started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4000 to 4099. Now, I know I'm going to have some errors at that point. So this first line picks up 4000 to 4099. The second line is picking up 4002 only, but 4002 sits within this range. So does that third line, 4003, sits within that range. And that would mean if I had a balance against that nominal code, when I run the report, the balance is, apart from being picked up individually, it's also being included against the description of product sales. So again, nice easy one, just check your chart of accounts, save any changes. Incomplete chart of accounts indicating I've got some problems. So I'll just preview that. And this time I've got a number of ranges. So it's telling me, let's zoom in again so I can already see that myself. So it's telling, first of all, one of the following ranges is enclosed within the other range. So in the sales section, I've got the description product sales, 4000 to 4099. Also within the sales section, I've got sales Scotland, 4002, 4002. So I would need to amend that. I've got a similar one for 4003 because that's also enclosed within that range. And also the final one is where the ranges aren't fully enclosed, but they overlap onto each other. So again, you would need to be aware of that one as well. If needed, you can obviously print that out. There is information to help you as well. If you just, at this point, just within your software, just press F1, it would bring up some information for you. And it's just a case of you going through and correcting those errors. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to where we began just about. And again, I'll just click check at the top, save the changes. I'm now on no errors found in this chart of accounts. So again, nice and simple. So that's it done. Now if I save that, you'll see for that one at the top that we were just amending there, it removes, oh sorry, this one at the bottom, it removes the word partial off the end of the description. So hopefully that's given you a good insight into the chart of accounts. Let's pop back to the slides. Keep your questions coming though, because we've got Tina, Jackie and James on hand, all being busy away answering any questions that you've been typing in. Just going to go back to the slides for a moment. It does bring us to the end of the demos. We can run a couple of additional ones if anyone's got any questions, to see if any do come through. But just to give you an idea of maybe some of the upcoming sessions that we've got booked in. Linking in very closely with this one, at 2 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to be looking at the management report. So we're going to be looking at the trial balance, the profit loss and the balance sheet, how they calculate, how they use the chart of accounts to calculate as well. So it links in very nicely with this one. Quite a few other sessions as well. So tomorrow, probably the most famous day of the year in the accounting world. It's International Accounting Day. Who knew? But to celebrate that, we will be running 3 webinars tomorrow. We've got Sage membership at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. We've got management reports at 2 p.m. And then we'll be running a quiz, just for a little bit of fun, on the Sage 50 accounts side at 3 o'clock. So if you want to attend any of those or any of the other sessions that we've got booked in, get yourself registered. Links will be included on your follow-up email. You should receive that. I think today we've got that scheduled in for 2 hours time. So 2 hours after we finish, you should receive that automated email. All free to attend. If you've got any requests as well for what you'd like to see, maybe see covered going forward, there'll be a little survey pop up as you leave today's session. Let us know. Pop it on there. Right, so as I mentioned, we've come to the end of the demos. If you've got any questions, we are going to hang around just for a couple of more minutes just to see if any do come through. We'll bang up to date with the questions. So we'll answer, if any do come through, as I say, we'll try and pick them up. But otherwise, let me thank you from myself, Jackie, James and Tina for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful as well, and to give you a little bit more insight, not only to the chart of accounts, but also if you need to create new nominal codes. Understanding your chart of accounts, it'll help you to understand what nominal code or what number you should use. So think about where you want that new nominal code to appear. Is it an overhead account? Is it a sales account? Have a look at your chart of accounts. Where does it sit? How do you want to report on that? So hopefully it'll give you a much better understanding of your nominal area. So thanks for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you've got any feedback for us, we always love to know if we've hit the mark, what you thought, how you think we could improve it, suggestions you've got for topics going forward, anything and everything. If you want to share that with us, there'll be a little survey pop up as you leave today. If you can take a minute to do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. And your follow-up email, which will include a number of links, so you can register for future webinars, you can watch recordings of sessions. The email that does come out, it will include a link so that you can watch the recording. You can download a copy of the slides if you've lost them or you forgot to do that. And also you'll be able to view some of the top questions and answers. It'll not be all question and answers, but some of the top ones will be listed. So we'll make that available. So again, that link will be available in around about 2 hours time. You get that on the email. Any questions at all? Obviously, we will prioritise the chart of accounts ones. Management reports, if anyone wants to learn more about that one, please get yourself signed up for this session that we've got booked in for tomorrow. Right, we'll give that one more minute just to see if any additional questions do come through, and just gives my colleagues a couple of, just a minute to finish off any questions or answers that they're busy typing in. But if we don't get any more, and then we'll just end the session at that point.